elk calling using natural vocalizations. With elk master Wayne Carlton and the nationally known hunting naturalist Bob McGuire.
Right? Throw it away.
In this video, you'll learn new techniques of how to use diaphragms and other mouth calls as Wayne Carlton shares his vast calling experience. Many of the elk behavior and vocalizations you're about to see have never before been documented, as noted whitetail authority Bob McGuire discloses many similarities between deer and elk. Relax now and enjoy 60 minutes of Wayne's innovative calling techniques. Experience the high-pitched sparring squeals of two mature bulls, a rarely observed vocalization of great interest to hunters. Follow Wayne afield as he calls in bulls to within 20 yards.
you can do anything on that. So it doesn't really matter, or it's not critical, that the latex thickness of that diaphragm may be a little bit from optimum. If you're a good caller like Wayne Carlton, you can still do all those different calls.
Well, with a lot of practice, and I assure you it takes a lot of practice being able to hear the different animals and try to mimic what they do.
Like this. Looky here. Remember these back then?
After the introduction of diaphragm, that's prehistoric. You should keep that for a collector's item.
I imagine so. It's like a 30-30 cartridge killed a lot of grizzly bear, but folks who know better now use better. That's the same ticket with that, right?
Just throw it away.
Things have come a long ways. Now, what did you do at the beginning and the end of that call? You did more than just a straight bugle.
Yeah, when you have called some elk in close, you find out that they have a deep guttural sound. And if you can imitate that, the way you do it is just by growls. If you want to sound like a heavier bull, you make a heavier growl. Okay? And then at the end of the call, it's like a very emphatic.
Oh, boy. So you just belt it out and clip it off.
You're really trying to prove a point there, and then you go right into the chuckles. If you want to do a chuckle, you don't always have to. But if the elk's doing it, then I'm just going to do what he does.
Some of the filming we did, we observed bulls that had obviously different tonal qualities to their bugling, but it wasn't always apparent why they were different. I didn't see any difference in the behavior, what they were doing. We would film bulls that were apparently under similar circumstances, but they sounded completely different on a bugle. How do you account to that?
Well, a young bull's going to have a softer voice. He doesn't have a real deep, raspy sound as an old bull. Not always proven that. I mean, sometimes you get fooled. We've called in spikes that sound like a more mature bull. And even on some of the footage that we have, you'll see that we have a spy point that sounds much heavier than he is.
Yeah, so there may not be a correlation between the age or size of a bull and the tonal qualities.
Not always.
Yeah, but
you can pick it out sometimes.
But if you're a betting man, you might go with a squealer being a young bull.
Right.
Yeah, somebody told me that on turkey once, and I called two Jakes boss gobblers. Oh, my goodness. I believe my neck is swelling. That's all right.
Make your hair stand up.
Yeah. Now, was that an old bull or a young bull? Assuming the old bulls are growlers and the young bulls are squealers.
Really, Bob, in hunting, I call that my contest bugle. Actually, in hunting, you don't want to try to outdo the bull. And I've caught in more bulls by just using a young bull sound than I ever have with a real heavy sound. And young bull is simply just like this.
That will carry.
It'll carry a long ways, and that stimulates interest. That high pitch that would hurt your ear will carry, and an elk be able to pick it up a lot further than you think.
The grunt tube adds resonance. It gives more of a breathy quality to it, and it also gives directional cast.
Right.
Can you really manipulate a bull elk with the direction that you aim that grunt tube?
The thing that really works well with is if you have a bull out in front of you and you want to move him, if he's in a wrong position for a good shot and you don't want to take that chest shot, if this is over your shoulder, like so, and your bow's right here, saying you're an archery hunter, you're already 20 yards further away than he thought. You're bugling away from him.
Right
Behind you, see?
Just like a bull may be 50 yards closer than you think if he's bugling back over his shoulder.
Exactly.
Oh, boy. Little elk hunting I've done, I've been fooled like that.
Some elk, when they bugle, they sound like they're a long ways away, but it's a real soft bugle, and you have to be aware of that, too.
Oh, okay. Now, do you want to bugle loud or soft?
I want to do whatever he's doing, but when he comes in, I want to tone it down. I don't want to try to blast him out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of the elk that I've called in was just a simple, without even any grunts, just a simple bugle.
Uh-huh. Do you ever grunt without the bugle, on the other hand?
Some elk will stay out there, and you'll even see on the footage, some of the elk will just, all they do is chuckle. Mm-hmm. And they'll rake a tree, and then they'll just start chuckling. It's just...
Oh, boy.
But the rule of thumb is whatever he does, that's what you want to do.
And
just
right away.
And don't try to outdo him.
Do you wait before you do it, or you step on him?
Sometimes I'll step on him. While he's doing it, I'll do it to him.
Does that work him up usually?
Just makes him madder. It's like you keep trying to talk to me and I interrupt you. That's my feeling that the elk have.
All right.
Okay?
You do that anyhow, don't you?
I try to.
I know what it feels like. Now, that grunt tube is handy for whitetail hunters, too. Not only will it give a cast to your voice as an elk bugler, but the grunt of a whitetail and many other animals is resonated through this. And I, in a tree stand, especially bow hunters are conscious of this, don't want that deer, buck, whitetail, looking up at me.
Mm-hmm.
So I aim this down toward the ground, perhaps behind an adjacent tree. I might be 20 feet in the air. And as long as the deer doesn't look up and see the movement, boy, they're good at seeing movement. But if you're careful, just like a bow hunter going to draw a bow, you can get the directional cast of the voice for that whitetail buck to look sideways. And it gives a good grunt for whitetail hunting.
Gives it a deeper sound.
Oh,
sure.
it does. You still get the twangy grunts. There's a lot of different grunts.
Mm-hmm.
The big buck grunts. That isn't necessarily true, you know, just like the turkey the old boss gobblers don't always have the deep gobble. The old buck whitetail don't always have the deep grunt. And I guess once in a while you have a squealer old bull or a big gravelly young bull. But I still in whitetail hunting, every time I hear that bold, deep, determined grunt, I'm thinking big buck, and it just sends a chill right up my spine.
Same thing with elk. You hear that deep, raspy sound, almost like a bray.
Yeah, you think he's stretched out his vocal cords, and that's bound to be a boomer. Maybe it's dominance. That's speculation on my part. I think that, I don't know whether the dominant bulls do more bugling than the subordinates, but it stands to reason whoever does bugle the most, whether it's by age or by dominance or whatever, they might have stretched out vocal cords. That could cause that raspier bugle. Some of the older bulls that we filmed together did appear to have difficulty making that pure high tone of the bugle until you worked them up.
Until you get them cranked.
And they grabbed it from somewhere. When they really got, what do you call that? The mad scream?
Mad scream. Just straight at you and scare you to death.
Oh, man, that just boils your blood as an elk hunter. It's almost a terrifying scream.
First time I heard it, I was scared to death. I was all cranked up in the heat of the battle, and he did it, and I thought, boy, here it comes. But the funny thing about it, quite often when they do that mad scream, they're gone.
That's as if to say, well, that's enough of this, but you better not come back, boy.
That's right. He takes
a declarative statement. Oh, okay. So it's a boss bull or a herd bull saying, okay, sucker, you better not come over here. A very declarative statement, and walks off.
And that's when I just keep following him and trying to aggravate him more and more.
That's good. Now, you have a peculiar technique that you call the yodel. Whop that on there and yodel up a bull elk?
Well, I learned to yodel from actually learning how to do the goose call, and then I had heard elk do a yodel on the end of their bugle before they start the grunts, and that's what, by being able to do the goose call, helped me do the yodel.
So you're coming off a goose call. Do the goose call first. Sounds goosey to me.
And then I incorporate that into the call.
Oh boy, you have a lot of components in there, and you just added one more. Does that tend to work them out?
If you hear the elk doing it, I like to do it back. If elk hunting's like a lot of other calling. If one thing doesn't work, try something else. And the more you know about it, the more choice you have of trying different things.
So you start with a growl, you get into the bugle, whichever type of bugle you want, gravelly or high, young squealer type, young again. And then you may do a yodel, and you work the chuckle in there too.
Right.
Okay. And a lot of details.
If he's timid, I just tone it down. I may not even do any grunts.
Tone it down by volume or by emphasis?
Both.
So you don't act quite as aggressive in your calling, and you also make it softer?
I've called elk in. Some of them come in a real strut, like a turkey would come in with a fantail. I've called elk in that they just come strutting in. They're flexing their muscles. They go through a stance. But then I've also called some in that were scared. They come slipping in. And they're silent. You may hear him bugle a long ways away. But then all of a sudden he's there. But he's probably had his butt kicked, and he's not real sure he wants to come in and do it again.
I understand.
That's where cow calls come in.
You've done some remarkable things with the diaphragm, but I got one very simple problem.
Okay.
I gag. And you have one remarkable yet simple solution, a separate external mouthpiece. And this has made a world of difference for my personal bugling. And I can't say I'm a good elk bugler, but I at least can use an easy latex diaphragm, and it's a regular diaphragm.
Right.
Just a kind that a store-bought type, they might say. And you've incorporated in this special mouthpiece. Why don't you show the folks now how this holds, the mouthpiece holds the diaphragm in exactly the right position or angle. It's an angular mouthpiece.
It's an angular mouthpiece, and the way I determined the angle, it was fairly difficult at first, but then when I thought about it, it got easier. I went to the hospital, and I had x-rays taken of the diaphragm and the roof of my mouth when I was trying to bugle.
That's really neat. And for the first time, by looking at the x-rays the viewers see now, you can determine the exact placement, internal placement within your mouth of a diaphragm.
Right.
When I saw that x-ray for the first time, I changed how I tried to put the diaphragm in, and I can almost avoid gagging on it. I don't know what I was doing wrong, lots of things, but one thing was I was jamming that critter way back further than I had to.
Too far back, and then it's flat. And you can even see on this, if you try to bugle with that reed flat, then you don't get the quality of sound. You can't get the tongue pressure against that reed when it's too flat. And if you have that diaphragm reed in your mouth and it's too flat, you have the same problem.
So how do you apply your tongue against that diaphragm?
Well, you can start out, for beginners, start out with it up flat or straight across, coming out of your mouth.
Do you do anything to your tongue? Does your tongue come out straight?
Just make a roll out of your tongue when you're trying to use a reed.
A roll
for
like this,
just
or a roll
your
like
tongue.
this?
It's a trough.
A trough.
A trough.
Okay.
Okay. And then you put your tongue right on the reed.
Okay.
Right on the reed, and start blowing lightly.
You trough your tongue, and you just insert it beneath the latex rubber. And the latex end should be aimed downward.
Right.
And then it just goes up at this angle.
Just comes in like that.
Okay.
And when you start, you don't really put the latex or your tongue under the latex. Apply the tongue right on the latex, and then as you apply pressure, it looks like you have put it under it, but you haven't.
Take that diaphragm out of your mouth.
Well, we can do it all kinds.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Let's see what it looks like.
And see, you don't have that quality sound. It's too rattly because of the way the reed is. So you bring the reed down into the tongue.
Okay.
Hear how that it changes? But for learning how to do it, the beginners, get it up here.
Okay. What other sounds can you make on that? You had a lot of versatility in the diaphragm in your mouth. Can you do all that on this?
You can do the same thing on this because you get the same quality sound because you have the diaphragm, and it's just a matter of the way you apply different pressure. For turkey, I just put my lips right in the center of it, and it's like spitting a seed out, going choo, 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 okay?
Okay.
Okay, it's like a feeding call of a duck. For geese, you just lay this part of your lip right there on the edge of the reed, right on the edge of the reed, and again, blow some air through it before you put in pressure, right. Same way.
Well, that's neat. How about a coyote?
Coyote
Call in a coyote.
Okay.
Oh, man. So you have the same versatility with that. I guess it's logical. The diaphragm is the same, and it's at the same angle relative to your tongue.
Same angle, and it keeps you from gagging on it.
Yeah, it sure does me.
It traps the air for you, and the angle is there for you. If you'll go by the instructions, the angle is there for you if you keep it that way. And you can play with it. You'll get different tones, different angles.
You know, the more we work together, the more similarities I see between all the members of the deer family in North America, even the different genus, like Cervus genus, the elk, and the white-tailed deer. It's amazing, not just the vocalizations, but the body language, a lot of the behavior, and marking behavior. You've done a lot of things to work the bulls up into a frenzy, and some of the footage that you shot of bulls thrashing the ground. How do you imitate that? What do you do? Is that good enough when the bull does that? What if he hangs up and he's already that frenzied? Is there a little extra something you throw at him?
Well, if he's, when you say thrashing the ground, are you talking?
Turfing, just digging up turf with his antlers.
With his antlers and pawing and urinating. Mm-hmm. I just continue the bugles, and if he's going to be real stubborn and stay out there, if I have the option of being hid, then I'll go ahead and rake a tree, or I'll throw in some cow calls.
Okay.
If you can get him that worked up, then your chances of getting him on in, it's pretty darn good.
Do you notice that bull that thrashes will come over and beat the brush, or rake his antlers in the treetops?
He'll rake his antlers in the treetops with such a action. Things are breaking, they're popping. So when I do rake a tree, I don't mind breaking limbs out of it. It doesn't bother me at all.
The best bugle, yodel-type bugle, that I've ever filmed came when a bull was worked up and he was rubbing a tree. But it's a big difference, as in whitetail, between scent marking and rubbing. I believe that most of the rubs that hunters find in the trees from either elk or whitetail come from scent post marking rather than from antler rubbing or thrashing. The violent rubbing or I don't believe that most of the velvet is removed by rubbing, but they still do a lot of antler engagement, both whitetails and elk. They also do an awful lot of forehead marking, wiping around their face. Perhaps the preorbital, the eye area, might be active on the elk, though it apparently is not on the whitetail. They do scratching. Even the cows and calves scratch their necks on what might be scent posts. Other cows, calves, and bulls who later come into the area will examine the odor. They'll come right over to a scent post, and they'll sniff it. We set up some scent posts with a variety of artificial scents, some deer scents, even aftershave lotion. And some of the scents that we didn't think really would work that well, as in whitetail, both species reacted most favorably toward the most bizarre scents, such as aftershave. I can't figure out what's going on, but it all points to one thing. All members of the deer family in North America have a great scent recognition desire. Whether it's curiosity response or it's communication between bull-bull, cow-cow, perhaps a territorial signpost in the elk, though I doubt that's it. It might be a demonstrative signpost in the whitetail, but not territorial. Look at these small elk, 2 calves, 1 cow. It doesn't take long to determine which one calf belongs to this cow. The second calf comes over, examines a scent post. They're wiping, they're licking, they're scratching their necks, and right there, that cow did a 4-foot stomp and said, "No way," to that second calf. That was a heck of a reaction, all over a scent post.
Well, the thing that I'm encouraged about is people have known for years now that whitetail do these things, and now that we actually see on film that elk do this thing, you can incorporate some hunting strategies that may help you out in the field.
Yeah, boy. Not just for cows and calves, too.
That's right.
Let's look at this bull elk.
See that bull elk?
He's coming in. He's following a scent trail on the ground. And it's a derivative of a white-tailed gland, the tarsal gland. Look at that elk come in. And now, straight to the scent post. When he's done, he rubs it. He examines it. He licks it. He smells it. He's been licking the scent post. He's been licking his nose. Look at that. Now, that's similar to flaming. He's responding to a scent. In this case, it was not a urine scent. It was a glandular scent, but not urine. They do, of course, perform flaming. That's the lip curl behavior that's common to many deer species. They inspire they take in air through the nasal passage, and it creates a negative pressure on a vomeronasal organ that is connected between the nasal passage and the roof of the mouth of the deer, in this case elk. And by inhaling and partially blocking the nasal passage, that negative pressure draws the urine that the animal has taken up on its tongue into the mouth, up into the organ, and it apparently is a very, very sensitive analytical device. It's probably as good as a chemist, and the deer, in this case an elk, may know by the constituents of the urine, whether it be from another elk, cow-calf.
Maybe how close in heat she is? Perhaps
the estrus status. That's very speculative and may not, in fact, be correct. It's interesting that you cannot determine from the facial expression or any other behavior of the bull elk or any other animal we've tried it on what he knows, because he doesn't let on. We have tried estrus urine from many different species, conspecific estrus urine at times, that is from a doe in heat on a white-tailed buck, a cow in heat on an elk bull. And they may act interested, but you can't tell the difference from that, and they're flaming of human urine. They're really attracted to human urine. They're attracted to urine, period, and you cannot, I defy you to distinguish by looking at the animal's response whether he has just performed fleeman on human urine or on real elk urine.
Are you saying then you think it's a something that they go through, a habit that they go through when they detect any odor like that they have licked up?
Urine odor. And it doesn't matter if it's predator-prey, whether it's been perhaps a carnivore, whether it's a man or a wolf or a coyote. It doesn't matter if he's been eating meat and taking in protein, whereby the diet would make the urine smell differently. And there appears to be no correlation because it is a different smelling urine, and it undoubtedly must be. Well, you can tell the difference in human urine depending on what you're eating. It smells different in the toilet even. But it apparently doesn't matter to the deer animals, whether it's elk or whitetail. They come into urine, and perhaps the fresher the better. It's amazing. It's been enlightening to me. When we first started testing, I expected it was a comparative response test where we discovered this first. We expected, obviously, a negative response and got a positive response. A very good, very consistent positive response. Here's a whitetail performing fleeman now. Looks the same. The elk, the whitetail. Here's an antelope performing fleeman. They all take a great interest in urine. Well, we covered an awful lot of different bugle types, but there's I know a lot more to call an elk than just bugling.
Yep, there's you do all kind of bugles and hard bugles and soft bugles, but the cow call, when that bull's hanging up out there, sometimes that's what's going to bring him in.
Well, why don't we take off and see if we can't get another setup, work some of those other types of calls. When I hunt whitetail, especially when I rattle, I commonly rattle when I vocalize to call them, there seems to be an element of violence that really incites a riot amongst the dominant bucks. Those same heavy-handed sounds, certain vocalizations, and especially when I start thrashing brush, when I bang antlers together, I do it as hard as I can. When I break logs, they are logs. They're not just brush. I'll take branches the size of my forearm and beat them against a tree, and it goes scampering through the woods, like a log, like somebody throwing a log.
Right.
And I'll just make as much violent noise as I can. And every deer will race out of sight except one, that dominant buck. And I know that there's a thrashing or rubbing technique in elk. So I'd like for you to show how you rub for elk.
Well, Bob, there's two different ways I've seen, actually 3 different ways I've seen elk rub. One of them is with the top of his head in limbs that are hanging down, much like your white-tailed
The
buck.
scent marking?
Right.
Yeah.
And then I've seen elk rake a tree to the point that it was like a D9 caterpillar. They just want to push that thing down.
Now that's raking.
And I've also seen them where they just get in the brush and they just whip it around. And I'll show you how I do a tree here. And I don't mind breaking limbs. I don't mind doing that. And you want to think that it's the base of an antler up by a tree, and it's not a real soft thing. And he pulls his head back up, and like, he's putting it down and he's rake it back up. And if you have some limbs, just
smack. I do that for whitetail, boy.
break those.
That
Like
sounds
that.
like an elk really working his rack.
A larger tree. I tell you, Bob, not only do they rake large trees, they'll get in some small brush like this right in front of us, and they'll just whip that around and break it off. It's
Brush is flying, huh?
brush is flying. That sort of stuff. Just, quite often when I've done that, I've got immediate response from bulls.
I didn't know. There's a lot of other techniques that you've told me about where not only do you call in the bulls, but you call in the cows. And when I think back on my whitetail experience, in order to call in bucks, sometimes I call in the does, in particular an estrus doe. If the buck is tending it, following a doe in heat, the only way to call in the buck is to call in the doe, and he'll follow sometimes.
Well, elk are doing the same thing. I've had bulls hang up out there, and they wouldn't come in. And on some occasions, I've called the entire herd in before the bull got there. and when you do call the herd in first, he's usually upset when he gets there.
You got some footage that shows that real well. You were out in another area of the mountains, and you called in a whole herd of cows.
Called in cows and calves, and there were 2 spiked bulls in that. And I'm not sure whether one of the spikes was bugling or whether the bull just didn't come in and I had heard him earlier. But, cow calls it's just a sweet call. There's different types.
Boy, that was great. So you called in a herd, you let her go. Show me some of those calls that you used.
On the just using the cow call, it's a nice sweet call. It's nothing real dramatic, and there's many. I've heard cows do this when they were lost away from the herd, where we busted a herd up. It was like this.
Oh.
And then I'll hear some other ones that are more exaggerated.
A little more expression.
Right. Just you can sound like several cows at one time if you like, just kind of by throwing your voice.
They don't get a
Like
directional effect on the video, but boy, I can hear it standing next to you. It's going back and forth
bounces
just
around.
by twisting your hand a little bit. That's great. Does anything? Is there any other reaction you might get? What's the deal now? You make cow-calf sounds, or at least those cow sounds, and you're stimulating the bull with the rubbing and thrashing, and then all of a sudden you kick him off by him perhaps thinking there's a cow with the other bull.
Right.
Does he come in direct, or does a cow come in? What normally happens?
It just depends.
There's a raven. Why don't you give a raven call? That was without a diaphragm.
We'll have some soup tonight.
Yeah, I'd say. You got a lot of them out here.
Nothing is ever solid in hunting. You never know what's going to happen. Elk will come in. They'll come in quiet. They may
Cows
come in slipping in on you. In some cases, I'm sure you've heard or read stories of where a large bull came in and stood right by a guy, and he was bugling to one out in front of him.
Right.
And that happens too.
The silent bull. I've heard people tell about that. In fact, some of the better elk hunters I've talked with, and you've told me similar stories yourself, they have silent bulls coming into the cow sounds. It isn't always a cow that comes in first. A lot of times they just hear a little bit of slip in the brush, maybe a footprint, a soft footprint. They think something's coming down, and the old big bull's right there.
That's right. One thing that really happened to me that frightened me pretty bad, and I should have had my bow in my hand. He was 16 yards away, and I had my back to him. 6 by 6.
Always happens to anyone. There are calf sounds that are similar to the cow, and I have difficulty in distinguishing them. I've filmed them. We filmed them together. Let's hear the difference now between a calf mew and a cow mew.
To me, the cow mew it's a little more mature sound, and a calf mew is like a child talking. That's the difference that I can detect. And the cow would be. Then you have just the basic calf call that calf sees mom and everybody's happy. And
so that was a cow call with a frozen diaphragm. And this is a calf call coming up.
Right, and it's just everybody's happy and no problems with anything. It's just it's a lighter sound.
Yeah. So I imagine there might, as in other deer, be different levels of insistence for that call, but that sounded just like perhaps a calf was standing next to the cow and everything was lovely. Perhaps a frolicking calf.
Right.
Boy, I love watching frolicking calves or just listening to the maternal neonatal vocalizations, the cow-calf stuff. I enjoy the small elk behavior just as much as the big elk.
Well, some of the footage you have, I found very interesting in the fact that what the bulls did with their herds as well as the reaction from one bull to another.
Yeah. I had a lot of fun this year. I don't know much about elk, but I've learned quite a bit. I know more than I used to. By staying with them for a little bit. And I had an unusual experience where I encountered, during a snowstorm, 2 harems in the same little sheltered basin. It was like on the lee side of a ridge and just up from a basin, and they were a little too close. Things were a little too tight for comfort. And there were 2 obviously dominant bulls with distinct harems. And boy, it was interesting. Watched them go back and forth, and their harems would bed down, and then the bulls would feel encroachment, not just from the other herd bull, but by peripheral bulls. It seemed like they're like vultures hanging around the wings, waiting to pick up the leavings.
Bob's experience began well before daybreak, when he slipped undetected into a close range position between the two harems. Just before there was enough light for filming, the two largest bulls engaged in a tremendous battle, with the loser being driven off. Just after daybreak, however, the number 2 bull returned to claim his harem, and the events which unfolded made for some fast action filming. This dominant bull had taken over part of the disbanded harem, with the balance of the cows and calves being split between 2 subordinate bulls. First group of cows to be recovered came at the expense of a small 4x5 subordinate bull, which quickly gave ground. Carefully rounding up his cows, the number 2 bull sounded his belligerent bugle, but avoided confronting number 1. Both bulls seemed reluctant to repeat their earlier combat. Now there remained only one other bull to take care of, as number 2 walked confidently toward the last fragment of his former harem, which he intended to recover. While giving ground initially, this older subordinate ultimately turned his antlers down to meet number 2 in a final sparring contest. And so it ended, with the 2 harems once again established by the 2 dominant bulls.
That peculiar vocalization that I heard, I observed when a subordinate bull was coming in on a harem raid. That is, the herd bull was preoccupied somewhere else. A subordinate bull would come in and give some strange glunking, I call it. It sounds similar to maybe a frog, but it's no frog there in the middle of winter time. And it was accompanied by body language with like a head threat, a head lowering, and he'd come in like this, like he was scooping up the cows. And man, did those cows know what it was all about. They just flat got up and said, well, it's time to go with this boy. Man, I really get excited when I think about new calling techniques for any animal. And that glunking sound, I can't help but think that's going to be exciting.
Well, I tell you, the other call that you have on tape that really interests me and I think can be dynamite for calling is that sparring squeal.
Yeah. Now, that's something else. When I first saw elk spar, I was really excited about it. And I sort of figured it'd be like whitetail, where the subordinate whitetail buck solicits sparring by licking the muzzle of the dominant buck. Wasn't anything like that. The dominant bull, elk, initiates sparring, or he did on every instance that I filmed it, with his loud squeal, and then both bulls, as they spar, continuously squeal. I thought I could distinguish a difference between the bulls. I think I could, but it may not be generally true. Those that I observed, the bull that initiated the sparring and was apparently dominant, had a deeper squeal. It's strange. When I saw bulls sparring on 2 different occasions, and then detected a 3rd bull that was not aware of it. Well, one time I saw him before the sparring started. He had a very interesting response. I'll tell you what. I don't know whether it was a clashing of the antlers or the squeal or perhaps both. But there's no doubt in my mind he came in to see who was doing it.
He did just start coming right in.
Absolutely. One time I saw him before the sparring started, and the other time I saw just a bull come in as if I had been rattling antlers for whitetail. And I believe, I don't have any elk experience, but I believe rattling should work with squealing.
I'm sure it would, and calling elk in, having those, well, early season elk, when they're not real responsive, but the rut's just starting, the more commotion that you can cause if you're in his territory, maybe 2 bulls fighting, he is curious enough to come on in and he may not say a word.
Bulls sparring, I believe, because in whitetail, early on in the rut, when they are still sorting out the hierarchy, there's a lot of very light sparring, low contest level. They're just sorting out the pecking order. I think that I would certainly believe that elk would do the same. And early in the rut, the early season elk hunting, like Colorado will experience starting in '86 season, that might be ideal for some of these sparring squeals and clashing sounds. And it doesn't have to be the heavy-handed stuff. At least it doesn't. It works out in whitetail for me that the timid, tentative sounds, time ticking, and the little lightweight grunts, subordinate vocalizations for whitetail, those do better in the early season. I can't wait to try these squeals.
Seems like after one season, I'm ready for the next.
Oh, yeah, before the next season. I'm ready anyhow, but I'm getting really up on this elk hunt. I am looking forward so much to continuing the filming that we're doing now for the hunting video.
Well, the hunting video is going to be done. Well, Bob, I'm sure at the beginning of this tape, people wondered what in the world a whitetail hunter was doing with an elk hunter, and why would you team up? But after seeing the response and habits of whitetail and the scent markings that they do and all the different habits they have compared to elk hunting, you can see the similarities in there.
I sure can. The scent marking, the framing behavior, a lot of the body language, and many of the vocalizations. And I can see where in elk hunting, there's a lot to learn. Not just in elk hunting. I think in any animal, the better a caller gets, the more he appreciates how little he knows about the total vocalization vocabulary. But there's a lot of fertile ground to plow with elk.
It certainly is. And having been a turkey hunter for years, you know, you learn the different sounds that turkeys make. But when you go into elk calling, we're on the threshold there. We don't really know all those sounds and what they might mean. And some of the footage that you have here, the clunking and the sparring squeal, things like that, those are things that I'm sure going to use next year. But know your calls and get real comfortable with them and let it be second nature. If an elk does something to you, go back right to him with that.
Fire back. That's something you taught me that's really important. Be really, really practiced on the calls and be so confident that you know in context what you should do. You learn about the body language, the different behaviors associated, how one call might mean one thing under certain circumstances and have an opposite effect because it could, in truth, mean something else under different circumstances. Get comfortable, and as soon as you see something, it'll be an automatic reflex behavior. Fire it back.
Knowing how to react to a situation in second nature, knowing your calls well, no matter whether it's elk, turkey, whatever you're calling, if you know how to react to a different situation.
And have the confidence to try things a lot of folks may not think is right. You surprised me with the alarm bark.
The alarm bark of a bull. And a lot of people don't realize that bulls have an alarm bark just like the cow does, but it's a deeper sound. And as you can see on this next sequence, that bull, when I did it back to him, boy, he just locked her back up.
Until that hunt, I didn't even know that bulls had an alarm bark. I heard cows, and I filmed it. But when he gave you that alarm bark and went boom right into the ground, he was fixing to leave, and you knew it. You didn't even think about it. You said straight away, alarm bark back.
Second nature. He did it. I want to do it.
Yeah. And not only did you help yourself by stopping it, He repositioned himself. What a shot, man. That's great. That's great.
I wish I was always that fortunate to make a bull stop in the right position.
Yeah, that one sure did.